The gavel comes down, and the whole courtroom freezes. Instantly, all the whispers, side-eye glances, and tension dissipate into absolute silence. All the people in that room, reporters, fans, even the court personnel, understand that whatever comes next will alter the Brown family forever. Kody Brown, the self-assured patriarch, in the midst of sister wives, is seated a few feet from the judge, face set in a grimace, jaws clenched, eyes scurrying over to Robyn, then to Janelle. Robyn's fists are clasped so hard her knuckles show white. Janelle remains immobile, but her eyes are fixed rigidly ahead, serene but determined. The weeks that had passed were fraught with rumors of money squabbles, charges of manipulation, and the gradual disintegration of bonds that had previously kept this polygamous clan together. But beyond the TV smiles and artfully worded press releases, fissures were opening up. And now, in this courtroom, the truth was going to spill out. The calm before the storm. When the hearing opens, Kody appears calm, perhaps even smug. He leans over and whispers something in Robyn's ear that results in a slight nod. It's the sort of swagger you only have when you feel like you already have things on your side. His lawyers present their argument with care, painting Kody as the patriarch of the family, the man who made tough decisions for the good of everyone. They claim every financial transaction was legitimate, every investment for the group's good. But the judge's face does not soften. If anything, it becomes more inscrutable. Then, Janelle's lawyer rises. And that's when the room shifts. The measured, calm voice presents document after document. Bank records, histories of transactions, even text messages, all telling a picture that doesn't fit Kody's story. These are not unsubstantiated claims. They're receipts, actual numbers, actual dates, actual words. And like that, Kody's smirk starts to slip. Robyn's breaking point. If anyone believed that the drama was going to remain polite and contained, they were sadly mistaken. It's Robyn, not Kody, who loses her cool. While Janelle's side presents increasingly damning evidence, Robyn then pushes back from her chair in protest. She rises to her feet, her voice shaking, but loud enough to be heard ringing through the courtroom. She blames Janelle for distorting the facts, for spilling intimate family affairs, just to rip apart what's left of the Browns. Her voice breaks, and tears flow down her face as she begs the judge to see that all they did was out of love and for the stability of the family. The judge attempts to call for order, but Robyn can't help herself. She's emotional, she's passionate, but it's not working in her favor. Each sentence makes the chasm between her and Janelle wider. The tension is so palpable, you can cut it with a knife. When Robyn finally does return to her seat, the whole courtroom turns to Janelle. And Janelle, without voice raising, gives one line that quiets the room. Love doesn't drain your bank account without asking. It's cold, it's calm, and it hits like a hammer. Janelle's turn to speak. When it's her turn, Janelle doesn't scream. She doesn't weep. She talks in measured tones, leading the judge step by step through years of economic misery. She explains being excluded from big decisions, learning about deals only when the money had been spent, and being made to feel in the dark while other people held the reins of the purse strings. For each argument Kody's people made previously, Janelle appears to have a ready counter-argue, and the documents to support it. Her tone remains firm, but the impact of her words is biting. It's not merely a matter of money and change. It's a matter of trust, of equity, and of the right to have a voice in choices that determine your own destiny. Kody interrupts several times, but each time the judge warns him to be silent. The male who once held ultimate control in his household sits silently, unable to control the conversation, and a role reversal not lost on any in attendance. The judge's warning. Before the ruling, the judge pauses to speak of the deep fractures in the family. They recognize that though relationships are complicated, legally speaking, money and contract obligations are cut and dry. The warning is implicit but unmistakable. Family melodrama doesn't justify financial mismanagement. And then, the judge's demeanor changes. It's time for the ruling. The verdict. The room is that silent you can literally hear the shuffle of papers. The judge decides in favor of Janelle, The judge determines that Janelle is owed substantial monetary restitution for money that was transferred or spent on her behalf without her knowledge. The judge further decrees legal protections to prevent Janelle from being financially bound to Kody's future business ventures unless she so specifically agrees. It's a two-pronged strike. Not only does Kody owe, but he also loses some control he previously took for granted. Gasps run around the courtroom. Journalists write wildly. Some of the audience members exchange wide-eyed glances. Kody is white-faced. Robyn's mouth has dropped open in shock, as if she can hardly believe what has just occurred. And Janelle? She gives herself the tiniest, quiet smile. Not a gloat, but a relief one. Outside the court, by the time they leave the courthouse, the media is waiting. Cameras flash, microphones are thrust forward, and questions are shouted over the noise. Kody keeps his head down, rushing past reporters. Robyn walks quickly behind him, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Janelle, on the other hand, lingers only long enough to make a few words. She thanks the court for seeing the truth and says she hopes it will enable her to heal and be independent. She does not gloat. She does not make cheap shots. She simply walks away, leaving the public to decipher her serene demeanor however they choose. Why this matters. This ruling isn't a legal victory only. It's a public declaration. For years, the sister wives' tale revolved around Kody's authority and the women working together in harmony. But now, one of those women has stood up in a court of law, pushed back, and prevailed. That shifts the dynamic for all concerned. It also sends a message to audiences. The ideal family picture you see on television isn't always what it seems behind closed doors. The fallout beneath the surface, sources close to the situation say this decision could spark even more lawsuits. Bank accounts will have to be sorted out, rights to property be defined, and trust, what there is of it, is now broken. Kody is allegedly betrayed and ambushed by how much Janelle took it. Robyn is said to be livid, feeling that Janelle crossed the family rather than dealing with it in private. But Janelle's team stands firm that she did try and was disregarded. One thing's for sure, whatever the future brings for the Browns, it will be under a much tighter microscope than ever before. Closing hook for your audience. So here's the question on everyone's mind. Was this merely a legal victory for Janelle? Or is it the start of the total collapse of Kody Brown's reality? Because if this ruling teaches us anything, it's that the sister wives' private squabbles are now public, loud, and supported by court decisions. And the next installment? Oh boy, it's going to be a whole lot messier. That noise, sudden, ringing, definitive, seemed to draw every eye to the bench. The varnished wood of the judge's podium shone in the fluorescent light, a beacon of the power that would render judgment on the fate of Kody Brown, and by proxy, the ensnared lives of all those tied to him. The air within was thick, heavy, the sort of silence that isn't peaceful, but charged. Like the moment between the clap of thunder and the ensuing lightning. Even the security guards, normally impervious to the dramas they see on a daily basis, stood just a bit taller. Across from him sat Kody Brown, wearing a black suit that was slightly too sharp, as if selected with the desire to present control. His hair was immaculately coiffed, an attempt to keep up the persona of the confident patriarch that the public had grown to recognize from sister wives. But behind the smooth-looking face, there was a glint of tension in his eyes, a barely noticeable twitch of his jaw whenever he looked at Janelle. Beside him was Robyn, his sole wife who was still publicly faithful to him. Her fists were bunched in her lap, her perfect nails biting into her palms as if suppressing a deluge of feeling. Occasionally, she'd edge closer to Kody, murmuring something that caused him to nod ever so slightly. Across from him was Janelle, serene, tranquil, and almost unnervingly motionless. Wearing subdued colors, she did not appear as if she were here to struggle with loudness. She appeared as if she came with verifiable facts, with patience, and an unwavering sense of determination. Her lawyer sat next to her, a tidy pile of documents and folders neatly arranged with determination, like a chess player preparing the board before making the first move. The weight of what's at stake. This was not another hearing. This was the culmination of months of behind-the-scenes stress that had leaked from private life into public soap opera. The Browns had spent years presenting a photoshopped image, the contemporary polygamist family navigating life with love, respect, and faith. But fans had seen the cracks, and those cracks had expanded over time to become fault lines. The battle today was not over child custody or divorce of marriage in the classical sense. No, this was over cash, joint accounts, assets, investments, the type of problems that tend to tear even the most intimate families apart. And here, the stakes were heightened by reality TV show celebrity and the public court of opinion. For Janelle, this was about taking back control, about making sure her financial future wasn't controlled by choices she didn't agree with. For Kody, it was about maintaining power, about showing he had done everything as a good leader. And for Robyn, it was about standing up for the man she trusted and the union she'd been loyal to under increasing scrutiny. The room itself became a character. The courtroom wasn't big, but it was full. Each bench was occupied, half with reporters and legal observers, half with interested fans who'd been lucky enough to get a seat. The soft hum of the air conditioning couldn't drown out the rustling of papers, the groan of wooden benches, or the occasional cough. In the front row, a court painter sat furiously sketching, preserving every raised eyebrow, every hand movement, every brief smirk or scowl. It was an unusual situation in which the public's curiosity about a reality TV clan collided with actual legal suspense, and everybody wanted to capture it. Even the scent of the room appeared heightened. The combination of polished wood, paper, and the subtle perfume or cologne of the people present. Not unpleasant, but it had that unmistakable aroma of formality, the sort that causes you to straighten up. The opening moments. Since the judge started by reading procedural comments, no one was really listening to the legal jargon. Everyone's attention remained on the players. Kody sat with his chin uplifted slightly, shoulders squared, attempting to assert confidence. His gaze sometimes shifted toward the press area, as if reminding him that this was not only a legal fight, but also a public one. Robyn leaned in close to him when the opposing lawyer thumbed through papers, her mouth moving rapidly in what appeared to be reassurances, or perhaps warnings. Janelle, on the other hand, never once glanced at Kody or Robyn. Her eyes remained riveted on the judge, her posture straight but loose. She didn't nervously fidget. She didn't squirm in her seat. She simply waited, as if time were hers alone to command. The first shift in energy. The instant Janelle's lawyer rose from his seat, the air shifted. The tone was patient, measured, but the words had gravity. They started off as a straightforward timeline. Dates, transactions, understandings. It was the sort of systematic approach which gradually tightens the screws without losing its voice. Every word appeared to draw Kody's focus back to the table before him, his initial confidence beginning to resemble a slip mask out of position. The first mention of unapproved withdrawals followed. Heads in the courtroom turned. Pencils of reporters scratched quicker. Kody's jaw tightened. Robyn shifted uncomfortably in her seat, crossing her legs, hardening her face. She looked at Kody with a look of apparent disbelief and annoyance, not so much at the charge itself, perhaps more that it was being expressed out loud in front of all these witnesses. The silent audience reaction. Despite the rules of the courtroom requiring silence, responses were ubiquitous, discreet but revealing. A woman in row 2 opened her eyes and mouthed something to the person beside her. A man in the rear furiously scribbled in a notebook. Even the bailiff, standing expressionless at the rear, appeared to blink a bit more rapidly as the charges came out. Kody's lawyer objected a couple of times, on grounds of relevance, but the judge permitted most of the comments to stand. That in itself spoke volumes. The judge was not disposed towards stopping the narrative construction from Janelle's side. The eye contact that said everything. At some point, Janelle's lawyer discussed a significant amount transferred from a joint account to one that was held only under Kody and Robyn's names. It was something that hung there for a moment, similar to a note in a song that won't resolve. For the first time, Janelle looked at Kody. Not for a moment, just a second. In the second, however, it felt like all the silent frustration of years flowed between them. Kody looked back at her, but not defiance in his eyes, only something else. Perhaps a glimmer of doubt, or perhaps awareness. The judge watching it all. The judge had spoken little beyond the opening statements, but their pen traveled continually across the page, making notes, highlighting certain points. It was unclear if they were tilted toward one side or the other, but the fact they were not constantly interrupting indicated that they were taking in the information. And then, no sooner had it started, the first round of testimony was over. But the atmosphere in the room was totally different now. When the gavel came down softly to announce a short break, people breathed out as though they had been holding theirs for 20 minutes. The minute the judge brought the court back into session, Kody Brown sat like a man who thought the game was already finished, and that he'd won. Shoulders squared, chin lifted ever so slightly, the edges of his mouth creasing in that half-smile fans of sister wives had learned to know and love. It wasn't arrogance exactly, not the loud, in-your-face kind of arrogance anyway. This was more the quiet, polished version. The kind of confidence that says, I've been here before, I know how this ends, I'm in control. He sat back in his chair, one hand lying loose on the table, the other sometimes tweaking his tie. Whenever the other side rustled papers or murmured, he'd share a quick, almost covert smile with Robyn. An unspoken conversation that said, they've got nothing. The family leader image. When Kody's lawyer started talking, the game was obvious. Present Kody as the responsible patriarch who'd borne the burdens of his family, made the tough decisions, and steered the ship through hurricanes no one else could have endured. The lawyer's tone was calm but authoritative, rendering a story based on years of shared experience. Mr. Brown has always been working in the best interest of his family. Every choice he's ever made, every economic move, has been one of stability, security, and preserving the overall future of the Browns. Kody nodded minutely at those words, as if a politician hearing a campaign speech that he'd himself vetted. The statement was veiled but calculated. He wasn't merely a husband or father. He was the commander of an enormously big, enormously complicated vessel. The first cracks. But even as his lawyer presented that gilded image, tiny fissures crept into evidence. Janelle's lawyer sat stone still, but occasionally, they'd scribble something down. Not a desperate note, but an exact, measured line, as if itemizing every vulnerability to target later. And then there was the judge's first question. Mr. Brown, when you refer to these financial decisions being made for the family, can you list specifically who was talked to beforehand before they were made? It was a reasonable question. Easy, really. But the hesitation that came next was longer than Kody likely appreciated. He looked at his lawyer, then at Robyn, before eventually speaking. Well, not every choice needed a complete discussion with the whole group. That's just not realistic. The response wasn't incendiary, but it was a tiny dent in the armor. The initial recognition that perhaps not everyone had been made privy to it. Janelle's team makes their move. When Kody's side wrapped up, Janelle's attorney stood, the energy in the room shifting instantly. Their voice wasn't loud, but it carried an edge, the kind of tone that says, we're about to peel back the layers, one by one. The opening statement was a simple timeline. Dates of joint account deposits, dates of large withdrawals, names on the accounts before and after certain transactions. It was precise, near surgical. No theatrics, no threats so far, just sterile, unadorned facts. Kody's sure smile still lingered, but it had narrowed a notch. The way a person smiles for a picture, but catches themselves blinking and can't help but continue mid-photo. The receipts. Then came out the documents. Not metaphorical receipts, actual ones. Bank statements, printed emails, even some scribbled notes from past years. The lawyer went through them step by step, stopping after every point to let the judge take it in. There was one email that caused the whole room to advance. It indicated that Kody had signed off on a transfer of a large amount from a family account shared by all into one jointly held by him and Robyn, with no mention of Janelle's signature. It wasn't the sole instance, but it was the one that appeared to cut closest to the bone. Robyn went rigid. Kody fidgeted again, angling toward his lawyer in a hasty, low-voiced conversation. The assertive posture was still present, but it was beginning to show cracks around the edges. Shoulders not quite so rigid. Smile not quite so easy. The judge's poker face. Through it all, The judge remained quiet, their face impassive. They didn't interject much, but when they did, it was to ask a question about particular dates or request copies of specific reports. Those were requests that meant something. It meant the judge wasn't brushing Janelle's testimony aside as irrelevant. They were taking notes, making connections, and each time the judge inquired about a point of clarification, Kody's hand would jerk toward the table, fingers tapping softly, the only external indication that the story was beginning to unravel from his grasp. Kody's interruptions. At one point, Janelle's lawyer said flatly, "There is no record that Mrs. Brown approved these transactions, and there is no written agreement granting Mr. Brown unilateral authority over joint funds." That was too much for Kody to let pass. "That's not true," he asserted rapidly, leaning forward over the microphone. "We had verbal understandings. This was understood. This was always the way we worked." The judge did not look up at their papers when they responded. "Mr. Brown, you will have your chance to testify in full. Please, let counsel proceed." It was a brief but significant moment. The judge's tone wasn't biting, but it was stern. It put Kody in the position of participant again. Not leader, not in charge, just another human being under the rules of the court. Robyn's side-eye. And yet, while Kody struggled to maintain his composure, Robyn's body told the whole story. She fidgeted perpetually, crossing and uncrossing her legs, smoothing out her blazer, darting between Kody and the lawyer reading on. When one particularly incriminating series of transactions was read, she gasped audibly and averted her head, her eyes on the distant wall as if tuning it all out. It was not the explosive tantrum that would erupt later in the day. That was yet to happen. But it was the initial visible fissure in her demeanor. The shift in the gallery. Even the audience sensed the momentum shift. Heads leaned in, lips forming whispers too low to hear in the back rows. Journalists' pens moved more quickly. Some fans remained frozen, their eyes switching between Kody's stiffening body and Janelle's unflinching serenity. It wasn't that Janelle's side had won so far. Not by a long shot. But the tone of the room had changed from Kody's dominant to Kody's defensive. The final blow of the day's first exchange. The division concluded with one final one from Janelle's lawyer. "Your Honor, during this time, Mr. Brown transferred over into accounts my client could not reach. We have no proof these moves were made with her full knowledge, nor that she reaped an equal benefit from these funds. We will present Exhibits A through H to substantiate these accusations." It was a statement delivered without shouted words, without drama, but the impact was absolute. Kody's smirk was completely gone now. His face was hardened, jaw set, eyes staring straight out. Robyn leaned forward in a hushed urgency. Janelle, meanwhile, simply put her hands neatly on the table and waited. She did not glance at Kody. She did not need to. In that moment, without a single word from her, the message was clear. This isn't about emotion. This is about facts. And I've got them. The morning had been strained but disciplined. Both sides had played by courtroom etiquette. Measured words, careful wording, emotions kept in check. Even when accusations were hurled, they were couched in respectful legal terms. But now, as the clock crept toward noon and Janelle's lawyer presented yet another financial document, the dam started to leak. And the first drop was from Robyn. It began subtly at first. She rocked in her chair, crossing one leg over the other. Her fingers drummed on her thigh. Her eyes darted from the lawyer to the judge, then to the table, and then returned to the lawyer. It may have appeared to anyone who did not know her like she was simply restless, but to the Browns' old followers, it was the clear indication of Robyn getting worked up. The trigger. What pushed her over the edge, though, wasn't a yelling insult from Janelle's camp. It was one deliberately selected phrase from her lawyer. "Your Honor, this isn't merely a matter of fiscal mismanagement. This is about willful exclusion, about one member of this family making decisions on behalf of the others without their consent or knowledge." The phrase, willful exclusion, stings like a slap. Robyn's head jerked up, her eyes tightening. She shot a glance at Kody, who sat stone-faced, jaw-locked. Then, without waiting for anyone else to respond, she leaned into her microphone. The first words spill out, Her voice, at first, wasn't loud, but it was sharp, almost brittle. "That's not fair. That's not the truth. You're making it sound like we were out to hurt her, like we were plotting against her." The judge looked up, eyebrows slightly raised. "Mrs. Brown, please." But Robyn kept going. "No, I'm sorry, I need to say this. We've been accused of doing things that are just totally twisted. We weren't secreting money. We weren't attempting to exclude people. We were attempting to keep everything together. No one else was willing to step up and take responsibility when things got tough, so Kody and I did." The emotional build. Her voice rose, cracking a little at the edges. She wasn't from notes. She wasn't practiced. This was unadulterated feeling pouring out, straight and genuine. Folks believe it's simple. They believe they can sit there and complain. But when you're the one writing checks, when you're the one putting food in the kids' mouths, when you're the one keeping a roof over everyone's heads, you have to decide quickly. And sometimes you can't pause and get everyone's approval. By this time, her hands were in motion as she spoke, palms open toward the judge, then toward Janelle. Janelle didn't flinch. She sat rigidly still, hands clasped, eyes on Robyn. That tranquility only seemed to incense Robyn further. "The accusations fly. You're behaving as if we are the bad guys in some tale, that we were plotting behind closed doors. But do you realize how many nights we stayed awake fretting? How many times we had to fix someone else's error? We were trying to save this family, not ruin it." Her voice broke on the final words, and she grabbed at a tissue, hastily wiping her eyes before she went on. "And Janelle, you know that. You know we've been through hell keeping things together. How could you stand here and act like you don't?" It was the first time she'd spoken directly to Janelle all day, and the room shifted at that. Even the court reporter looked up for a second. The judge's intervention. "Mrs. Brown," the judge interjected sternly, "I know this is a difficult moment for all of you, but you need to let counsel present their case without interruption." Robyn took a deep breath, clutching the tissue in both hands, but she didn't let up. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I just can't sit here and let them spin all this. We didn't do this for greed. We did it because we loved. We did it so the family wouldn't break apart." The tipping point. The tension in the room was now a living thing, heavy, almost vibrating. Kody placed a hand on Robyn's arm, a silent attempt to calm her, but she shook her head, eyes still locked on the judge. Then came the sentence that would be replayed in every online recap for days afterward. "If this is what loyalty gets you, then maybe I've been loyal to the wrong people." The words hung there, heavy with innuendo. Kody's hand halted on her arm. Janelle's attorney jerked their head back, as if they'd just received a present. "And Janelle?" She leaned forward just so, and talked into her microphone, low and sharp. "Love doesn't drain your bank account without asking." The room responds. Like a shot in the silence, some in the gallery gasped. Someone at the back whispered, "Wow," unobtrusively. Robyn's lips parted, but no sound emerged. For the first time during the tirade, she looked dazed, as if the impact of Janelle's measured, surgical retort had fallen harder than any verbal altercation might. The judge restores order. The judge rapped the gavel. "We will adjourn briefly. On our return, I want statements to be made through counsel only. This is not the occasion for direct confrontations." The bailiff edged forward as a precaution, but it wasn't needed. The mood in the room had changed once more. Robyn slumped back, her cheeks pink, touching at her eyes but speaking no further. Kody leaned forward to mutter something, but she didn't react. The fallout. During the recess, the courtroom hummed. Journalists huddled in the hallway, already composing headlines. "Robyn Brown blows up in court." Sister wives hearing left speechless by emotional breakdown. Janelle's icy clapback freezes the room. In the gallery, fans nodded to one another about what they had just witnessed. Some felt for Robyn's passion, indicating it proved she cared. Others believed it was evidence she was shaken, her cool crumbling under the stress of evidence she could not deny. While Janelle remained seated, quietly going through a folder with her lawyer. She did not smirk, she did not grin, she just got ready for round two. Why it mattered. Robyn's tantrum wasn't an over-the-top moment. It was a turning point. Up until then, the case had been a war of evidence, delivered in measured tones. Her meltdown disrupted that cadence, laying bare emotion and diverting focus away from the paperwork and onto the human drama. For some, it made her relatable, a woman defending her family with her whole heart. For others, it made her look defensive, as if the pressure was too much. Either way, it was unforgettable, and it left one undeniable truth hanging over the room. This fight was far from over, and the next phase would be even more brutal. The instant the judge declared a brief recess following the incendiary testimony, the courtroom seemed to have been transformed into an erupting live volcano, primed to ignite once again at a moment's notice. Tension was so palpable, you could almost hear the collective pulse of every individual in the room. Cameras snapped aggressively from the press bench, catching every micro-expression on Kody Brown's face, every frown of Robyn, and every assertive glare of Janelle. When the judge called everyone back to order, the air shifted. This was it, the phase where every unspoken truth, every hidden motive, and every raw emotion would be dragged into the light. What came next was so intense that even viewers following online said they had to pause and catch their breath. The judge turns up the heat. The judge leaned forward, taking off his glasses slowly, that slow motion that lets you know somebody's about to swing a verbal sledgehammer. His voice, smooth as silk but with a cutting edge, filled the room. We're not here for drama. We're here for facts, and the facts have been obscured by personal agendas, money disagreements, and, quite frankly, manipulation. He didn't mention whose actions, but everyone's eyes darted to Kody. Even he couldn't keep his typical belligerent stance. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. Robyn tightened her grip on his hand, but it was obvious the reassurance wasn't taking. Janelle, across the aisle, sat with arms crossed, ruling not out of defiance, but that centered confidence of someone who knew the truth was at last being told. Janelle's turn, the calm before the storm. When the judge asked Janelle to speak once more, she didn't hurry. She put her notes aside, gazed directly at the bench, and began with a restrained tone. Your Honor, this is not merely about contracts or dollars. This is about years of domination, about selective truths, and about the intentional dismantling of a family. You could sense the words strike Kody like darts. Janelle wasn't screaming. She didn't have to. The even-tempered way she delivered each accusation made the more hurtful ones feel that much more crushing. She outlined financial discrepancies, times Kody supposedly diverted money to projects controlled by Robyn, and the ways she'd been excluded from major decisions about family property. By the time she was done, the gallery was abuzz, and even the judge jotted down notes furiously. It was the sort of evidence that's not only heard, it's also felt. Robyn breaks. Her silence. Robyn, who had been reserved for most of the hearing, suddenly leaned into her mic. Her voice trembled at first, but then grew louder. That's not fair, Janelle. You know that's not how it happened. You're making it sound like I'm some kind of schemer. The energy in the courtroom surged immediately. The judge had to remind her to address the bench, not Janelle. But Robyn was defending not only herself, she was fighting for the story. She accused Janelle of distorting what had happened, said some financial actions were approved by everyone at the time, and maintained she'd always acted in the interest of the family. However, there was a problem. Her statements didn't match some of the documented evidence already submitted. And that's where things got tricky. The evidence that changed the tone. The defense attorney brought forth bank records, timelines of the contracts, and even text messages that contradicted outright aspects of Robyn's testimony. The instant those messages were read in court, messages in which Robyn was nudging Kody to secure certain money before the other wives got a voice, you could practically hear the simultaneous gasp. Kody's face flushed a deep, ruddy red. His jaw was clenched so hard that it seemed painful. Robyn's shoulders dipped, but she worked hard to control herself. This was the pivot. The judge didn't say a thing for a couple of seconds, simply reviewing the evidence painstakingly, as if to allow the impact of the discovery to sink in. Kody's outburst. No longer able to sit still, Kody rose to his feet and spoke to the court, his words thundering. This is being distorted. These women are conspiring against me, attempting to ruin my reputation. The judge quickly reminded him that public displays of emotion would not serve his case. But Kody persisted, gesturing at Janelle, calling her jealous and vindictive. and portraying Robyn as the sole one who had been faithful to him. It was dramatic, sure, but the problem with dramatic outbursts in court is that they can backfire. The judge noted Kody's tendency to deflect rather than directly answer accusations. For viewers watching this unfold online, it was the kind of moment that screamed, he's losing control of the narrative. The final exchanges before the verdict. The tit-for-tat between Robyn, Janelle, and Kody during that last stretch was akin to playing a game of high-stakes chess, except the pieces were emotions, credibility, and years' worth of pent-up resentments. Each word counted, each flinch of the face analyzed by the media. Janelle, resolute, stayed grounded in hard facts and her own experiences. Robyn, now visibly shaken, vacillated between defending herself and defending Kody. And Kody, well, his anger erupted into veiled shots at the judge, which did not go unnoticed. When the judge finally uttered, "That will be enough," the whole courtroom collectively breathed a sigh. The build-up to the verdict. By this point, no one had to be informed that the judge's ruling was going to be historic, not only for the individuals in that room, but for the entire Sister Wives fan base. For years, there had been speculation regarding money, favoritism, and family splits. Now all was exposed, and now the judge was going to encapsulate it in a verdict that could not be repealed. The anticipation was so palpable you could practically sense the pulse of the room. Everyone hunched forward, eyes fixed on the bench, anticipating the very first words that would determine the rest of their lives. And that is where the judge coughed, looked at the clock, and announced, "This court will reconvene after lunch for the final verdict." It was the classic cliffhanger. Gasps, whispers, and even some groans traveled around the room. Out in the newsroom, reporters frantically scurried to send breaking reports. Within, the actors in this drama remained seated in stunned silence, each one absorbed in his or her own whirlwind of thoughts. This episode concludes with the emotional meltdown, stunning evidence, and the kind of tension that will keep viewers watching the next installment. It was not simply court drama. It was the climax of years of unresolved tension at last reaching its boiling point in public sight. The air in the courtroom was thick, nearly too thick to inhale. Weeks of hearing testimony, fiery arguments, emotional breakdowns, and bare-bones disclosures had come down to this very moment. Every chair in the gallery was filled, every journalist on high, and every gaze fixed upon a single figure, the judge. His face was inscrutable, a mask chiseled out of stone. But those who had seen him come before in previous cases knew that behind that collected exterior, a moment of historic import was being prepared to be let loose. Kody Brown, looking neatly but decidedly pale, kept shooting nervous glances toward Robyn, seated stiffly beside him. Her mouth was pressed tightly together, her fists clenched, as if she were holding herself together through sheer force of will. On the other side of the aisle sat Janelle, folded arms and watchful gaze on the bench, a glint in her eye that could only be defined as a combination of expectation and determination. The air was so charged, you could practically listen to the room's collective heartbeat. The judge cleared his throat, and the faint echo stilled the whispers immediately. "In the case of Brown vs. Brown," he started, his tone unruffled but with an air of conclusiveness. Cameras rolled, pens were at attention, and the world paused for a flickering second. The long road to this moment. Prior to the verdict, the judge summarized salient details of the trial. He referred to money disagreements, emotional abandonment, and the dissolution of trust that had been analyzed over hundreds of hours of evidence. He noted the special circumstances of the Brown family's polygamous arrangement, but stressed that the court was there to maintain justice and safeguard the legal rights of all parties. Robyn's gaze dropped as he spoke of moments of perceived favoritism and manipulation, periods that had stirred hot arguments within and outside the courtroom. Janelle stiffened when he referenced the sacrifices she said she made for the family, only to be betrayed in return. And Kody, his jaw clenched whenever the judge's words painted him in a bad light. The moment of truth. At last, the judge came to the moment everyone was waiting for. "It is the decision of this court," he hedged, looking around as if to make certain everyone was holding on to the very tip of his words. And they were. that the division of property, custody issues, and all other issues in dispute will be decided as follows. The next few minutes took what felt like hours. The words of the judge poured out like a string of bombshells. The court granted Janelle far more of the marital property than Kody had offered, referencing her decades-long economic contributions and the imbalances in the past few years. Gasps were heard from the audience. Robyn clenched her seat until the whites of her knuckles showed. On the custody question, the judge's ruling shocked all. Janelle was awarded primary custody of her younger children, with Kody having visitation privileges on a planned schedule. This was a bitter defeat for Kody, who had worked zealously for equal custody, presenting himself even during testimony as the more stable parent. The rationale of the judge? He mentioned emotional stability, home environment, and consistency of caregiving, areas in which Janelle's track record was, from his perspective, superior. The shockwaves strike the courtroom. The instant the verdict was read, the responses were incendiary. Janelle took a deep breath, her eyes brimming, not with victory, but with relief. She glanced briefly at her lawyer, who nodded with a little reassuring smile. Kody, though, appeared to have just been struck by a train. His mouth fell open. His hands fluttered on the table. Robyn's hand went out to his arm, and he jerked it away slightly, his eyes fixed on the judge as if attempting to comprehend the unthinkable. Next came the ultimate surprise. The judge delivered a stern reprimand to Kody personally for his behavior in court, including moments of outbursts, evasive responses, and efforts to coach witnesses. This court will not stand for conduct that undermines the integrity of these proceedings, the judge declared bluntly. The cameras caught every flicker of Kody's face: shock, ire, woundedness, and perhaps just a hint of fear. The aftermath begins immediately. As soon as the gavel hit, marking the official end of the case, the courtroom burst into pandemonium. Reporters rushed toward the front, yelling questions. Kody, do you believe that verdict was just? Janelle, how does this affect your future? Robyn, do you support your husband now that this has happened? Security quickly moved in to maintain order, but the emotional energy in the room was impossible to contain. Janelle, still composed, addressed a single comment to the press. This was about truth, fairness, and doing what's right for my children. That's all I'll say for now. Kody, on the other hand, stormed out without a word. Robyn trailing close behind, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and humiliation. The public reaction. Outside the courthouse, the word spread like wildfire. Social media erupted. #SisterWives verdict was trending within minutes. Fans and critics alike chimed in. Some hailed Janelle's win as long-awaited justice, while others viewed the verdict as a devastating, unjust blow to Kody and Robyn. Clips of the trial made the rounds on the internet, particularly the judge's withering criticism of Kody. The late-night talk show hosts started preparing segments while the ink on the decision was hardly dry. The verdict was not only a legal one, but also a cultural moment. Private reactions behind closed doors. From sources within the family, the post-verdict hours were as dramatic as the trial itself. Janelle was said to have brought her children and close friends together to quietly celebrate at home, out of the public spotlight. Kody, on the other hand, went into hiding with Robyn. Sources alleged furious fights broke out between them, with Robyn wanting him to battle the ruling in the appeals courts and Kody feeling drained from the constant spotlight. The other members of the family, Christine and Mary, both issued cautiously worded statements, neither rejoicing nor condemning the decision, but their delicate use of words suggested underlying tensions. The last word from the judge. As the judge departed before adjourning, he left both the public and the family with one final piece of counsel. This is not a victory for one and a loss for another. This is an order to proceed with respect, dignity, and the knowledge that the decision reached here is in the best interest of everyone involved, particularly the children. It was a declaration intended to be healing, though whether it would be effective in this broken family was anyone's guess. What's next? The decision might have put an end to one book, but Kody Brown, Robyn, and Janelle's story is still very much ongoing. Legal experts estimate that Kody could file an appeal, although the likelihood of reversing the ruling is low considering the judge's thorough explanation. While Janelle's life is on the cusp of transformation, fresh prospects, restored autonomy, and possibly a future without the incessant battles for dominance that marked her time in the plural marriage. Robyn and Kody's future, however, is bleak. With their public reputation damaged and their court fight lost, they must now tackle the impossible task of restoring not just their reputation, but also trust inside their own marriage. And for viewers of Sister Wives, this ruling will be noted as the day that reality television fully merged into reality, with repercussions no script could have anticipated.